Hi everybody, this is Anne. In the pottery world, an applique is a decorative element used to add an elegant three-dimensional surface to a piece. It's traditionally cut from a separate slab of clay then attached to your pot's surface. The cutting out process can be tedious and working with very thin clay can be tricky. In this video, I'm going to show you an easy way to achieve that three-dimensional surface that'll add elegance to your pot, and it only takes minutes to do. I'm starting with a sheet of craft foam. It's flexible, resilient to water, and has the perfect dimension. I want to add some small leaves to one of my projects, so I'm going to draw a simple leaf to the foam. Remember, a blockier design works best for this process. On a quilter's cutting mat, I cut out the leaf using a sharp blade. An X-Acto will work, or even a utility knife, as long as it's sharp so it can easily punch out the center. I also need some slip. I scooped out some of the lumpier contents from the bottom of my reclaimed clay bucket. I began stirring it around, adding little amounts of water until it slaked down to a pudding consistency. I ran that through a small kitchen strainer to get rid of any chunks. You can see that the slip is just thin enough to pass through the strainer. It shouldn't be so watery that it slides through fast or thick that it clogs up the little holes. I'm going to test out the slip before adding it to the clay. I dampened the back of the stencil so it stuck down a bit to the table surface. Then using an old splayed brush, I just pounced the slip into the template cavity. When I remove the template, I should have a raised, distinguishable design. If the slip is leaked out under the template, the slip is too runny. Add more reclaimed clay and stir and strain it to thicken it up. If the clay is too rough and lumpy, add a little water to thin it down. Now let's try the technique on a bowl that I hand-built. If you want to see how I made this canoe bowl, check out the link above. When the bowl was leather hard, I took it out of the styrofoam mold and carved 3 stripes around the bottom section, leaving a nice border for my appliques. To apply the appliques, I dampened the back of the template and placed it down flat to the clay, making sure the edges of my template are tight to the clay. I pounced the slip into the cavity, filling it in all the crevices, and making sure I have a thick layer. You don't have to completely fill the craft foam to the brim. When I remove the foam, here's my applique. Now let's do another one. I ran a barely damp sponge over the template to remove any excess slip on the front and back of the template, then went again. I like the template a little damp so it sticks better to the clay, but not soaking wet so that it capillaries the slip to leak under the edges. You can see that I've gone ahead and created 3 appliques. Let the slip dry completely before moving forward. Once it's dry, you can clean up the edges. One way to do this is to use a ball tool and carve a small outline around your image to give it a crisp line. Here it is, all bone dry. The stars and stripes around the canoe bowl take on a nautical theme, I think. To finish it, I glaze the inner rim and outer rim with Amico Sky Blue and the inner bowl, upper border, and stripes with my white liner glaze for this really cool bowl. I fired it to cone 5 with a 7-minute hold. Now let's see if we can alter or add detail to these appliques. Here's a piece that I threw on the wheel and altered to take on a shell appearance. I want to add shell appliques, so I cut one out of craft foam. Again, using a dampened template, I placed it on the clay and pounced over it to create the shell. At this point, you can see brush strokes in the slip, sharp unwanted edges, and the shell doesn't have any defining characteristics. I want to clean it up and give it a more shell look. When the slip is totally dry, I can smooth it out. I just dampen my finger and rub it over the top of the surface. Keep in mind, my clay has no grog in it, so it'll slake down without being overworked. Now that I've dampened the clay a bit, I can go back and carve in some distinguishing lines to give it an even more clamshell appearance. I'm using a small ball tool and starting at the top center of the shell, then carving shallow lines down to the point. I slowly work my way around down one side and then the other side, being careful not to intersect with my other lines. Using a little thicker ball tool, I'm carving little deeper lines along the top border, rounding around the sectioned off areas. I'm being careful not to carve too close to the pointed part, as it would be too easy to chip that point right off. Using a damp sponge, I wiped off the crumbs, and this also slakes down sharp carved edges. For those little extended edges, I just outline them with a small ball tool. I cleaned up all the appliques on this vase. You can really see the difference that the little bit of carving makes to the overall look of the piece. And here's how I finished that. I used Amico Weeping Plum to one sectioned off area, leaving the shells white. I then brushed my white liner glaze over the rest of the piece, but glazed those shells with the Amico Weeping Plum for this unique vase. Now let's try one more experiment. I added a little black mason stain to my white slip and stirred it and strained it really well. I created this sort of suibon used for ikebana arrangements and painted part of it with black underglaze. I'll use the template I created at the beginning of the video for this applique. Again, I dampened the back, then placed it on the white part of the clay and applied the black slip. I then used a smaller detailer fingernail brush to apply a stem. Over the black parts of the vase, I used the white slip to make contrasting leaves. As black is such a powerful color, I'm making sure I have a thicker slip application so it covers well. Now I can go back in and paint the stem. Here's another vase I created earlier where I added some extra small touches to the leaves and to the vase too. Actually, I ended up changing my mind about the veins, just adding little dots to their centers to each leaf. To finish the vase, I glazed the black section with Spectrum black glaze and brushed my white liner glaze over the white clay for this contrasting piece. The leaves will add a touch of elegance around any flower arrangement. Let me know if you tried adding appliques to your work and the method of adding them that works best for you in the comments below. Thanks to the newest members of our Little Street Pottery Research Facility team. If you'd like to join the team and earn a title, click on the Super Thanks button or the Buy Me a Coffee link. In any case, we invite you to subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you next time in the studio.